What's the difference in outlook between people who lack a belief in free will and those who believe in free will, who don't lack that belief?
Well, it's a very astute question. Good for you. I realized also when I was working on the free will book that you would think in psychology they would have radically different theories about how behavior is caused. And again, I've talked to a lot of both. And they don't. They pretty much see things the same way. They understand there's attitudes and emotions and rational consideration and impulsive choices. They all recognize the same thing. And the most striking point to me is both sides believe that the human mental system, so we're talking about a system in the brain that causes behavior, right? The brain tells the muscles how to move. It sends out commands. And so whatever there is before that, that's the action control system, all the inputs into the brain telling you what to do. Even the skeptics agree that the human system is radically different from anything else in nature. I mean, just what we're doing right now, there's no other species who can have technology to have conversations of scientific and philosophical issues. No part of this is found even in chimpanzees, our closest relatives. So it's clear evolution sent us off in a different path and created a new system for controlling behavior that's unlike anything else that came before it. And so they're merely disagreeing as to whether this marvelous new system deserves to be called free will or not.
I see.
And to me, that's not the scientific issue. That's a terminological question or whatever. The scientific challenge is to understand how this marvelous new system works. And so most of my book is devoted to laying out things like that.
What I meant was, well, I've heard it said that when people lack a belief in free will, that they're more fatalistic and even depressed at times. But simultaneously, I've heard that Stoicism and Buddhism, when adopted, at least here in the West, or our Western versions of them, which espouse a so-called realization of the lack of control, or even in some interpretations, a complete obliteration of the illusion of free will, that people feel a sense of inner peace and freedom. So I don't know how to reconcile those two or what separates them.
Yes, there is a moderate amount of research the last, I'd say, last 15 years on belief in free will. So, it's nice the scientists don't have to say whether they believe in it, whether they think it's true or not. Let's just say some people believe in it and some people don't. It's also, most people believe in it to some degrees, so some people believe in it more than others. But still, you can compare the ones who believe in it a lot versus the ones who are only believe in it some or not. So, what are the differences? Untangling those, because they're correlated with a lot of things. A number, Christian religion, for example, emphasizes free will. So among the people who are high believers in free will, you're going to have more Christians. So if they're happier, is it because they believe in free will or because of their Christian faith, which contributes to that? So I don't think we've quite gotten to the bottom of that yet. Now, there are experimental manipulations as well as measures to try to convince people to believe more or less in free will. Trying to increase the belief in free will doesn't do much because people already believe in it to a fair degree, as in being able to make decisions and act differently in the same situation. But you can try to convince people, as Sapolsky does in his book, that they don't have any free will. Now, he thinks it will lead to a more healthy, decent society. I'm skeptical of that. If it worked, I would have thought somebody would have tried it, and then the successful ideas would have spread.
Are there no experimental results of experimenters in some double-blind fashion saying to one group that you lack free will, or creating some circumstance where the locus of control is not them, and then seeing what the results of that are?
Yeah, double-blind is hard. Because you have to convince them of it. But you can have people read things denying free will, or there's this way of priming the brain where you write a bunch of statements supporting free will or not. And the general finding in those is that making people believe less in free will makes them behave in a more antisocial fashion.
Interesting.
The first study showed people were more likely to effectively lie, cheat, and steal. It was one thing. They were taking a test. They were told they'd get paid for correct answers, and they could score their own answer sheet. And so, and supposed to get away with it, nobody would be able to check on them. Well, so the people who were told to not believe in free will, who were induced to not believe in it, were more likely to, they claimed they got more answers correct than in the other conditions. So that's a dishonesty kind of thing. In ours, people were more likely to say they'd behave aggressively. Maybe they actually did behave more aggressively. They were less helpful to others. There are a variety of other findings that go with this. The replication record on this has been uneven. There are no findings in the opposite direction, that making people disbelieve in free will makes them, more pro-social in their behavior. They're a little more prone to not punish people for doing bad things, but even that is just anecdotes about strangers in real relationships. Disbelieving in free will makes them less likely to forgive their partner, because they don't think their partner can change if their partner did something bad. So the findings are that belief in free will supports positive pro-social behavior, but again, the replication record is not that. Sometimes it doesn't work. As I said, when it works in that direction. Sometimes it doesn't work. Now, I'm not totally surprised by that, because a lot of these replication studies are done in a more casual fashion, and you really have to get the person to buy into it to some degree. If you just say, okay, read this and now fill out this questionnaire or whatever, well, okay, they read it, but maybe they didn't buy it. You have to push them a little harder.
In other words, to summarize, the evidence suggests that it's pro-social when you do believe in free will, and anti-social when you don't. However, that evidence is not terribly strong, but there isn't evidence to the contrary. If anything, there's evidence to the neutral position.
Yes. Yeah, there's either no effect or the effect you described, the pro-social effect of believing in free will, which, again, it's important to function in society. When the judge asks, did you enter into this contract of your own free will? He's certainly not asking if you did it randomly.
Yes.
He wants to know, did you understand the meaning? Did you agree to it when nobody was holding a gun to your head? Were you able to say no? And did you understand the consequences? In that case, you're responsible. And then you have to pay or perform the duty or whatever you contracted for. If you were forced into it, then the judge is more likely to say, well, okay, that you should not be obliged to fulfill that contract, because you didn't freely choose to do it. That's the kind of thing that matters in human social life. We judge people by their actions, but by the intentions behind the actions. And if you do something that you didn't intend to do, you're not necessarily totally free of blame, but you're less blamable than if you intentionally did it.
I imagine you brought these counter-arguments to Robert Sapolsky. What were his comments?
The debate is online. People can hear it. It was a moderated debate, so we were sort of limited. I talked to the guy, Robert, afterwards, and we kind of agreed it would have been nice if we could have just had a discussion ourselves. The organization appointed a very nice moderator who had a list of questions to ask us, and so she structured the discussion. We had a couple-minute statement each at the beginning, but after that, we weren't able to really argue back and forth, and I wish we could have.
Just so you know, on the Theories of Everything channel, this channel, there's a format that I have called a theolocution, which is my tongue-in-cheek way of giving reverence to the guests. It's the gods talking. What it is
okay.
Yes, because they're titans in their field. And it's me moderating, except I give an unlimited amount of time to each guest. And I'm not a fan of the standard structured debate format where you have to put your stake in the ground initially with a 2 to 10 minute statement, and then they have a counter to that. And there's a variety of statements said, and you have to keep track. And so it's essentially you all having a conversation, which is just mediated by myself, and the floor is open to both of you. I can organize that.
That would have been good. If I mean, you could write to him and say you want to do it. If he's up for it, I certainly would be. He's super busy, and but I know he's really interested in these ideas.
I spoke to him on this channel. It did fairly well, so I imagine he would be wanting to come back. If you enjoyed this Toe clipping, then the full video is linked in the description. You should also sign up for Toe Mail, which is again in the description and the pinned comment. You'll receive immediate access to all exclusive updates from the Theories of Everything podcast. It also helps me communicate directly with the core Toe community. You'll also receive my top 10 toes. Think of it as the intellectual version of Quentin Tarantino's Obsession.